Isn't this kind of cool that your Indiana colleague said that or maybe the person says, well, the birds were shortstop and they didn't actually come to Louisiana this year because the radio was found in Indiana. Actually, they weren't at all. It came all the way to Louisiana and it sampled and it decided, maybe this is not such a cool place to hang out. So it actually went back. So the bird's not shortstop at all. We don't know how much of that occurs. We know from mallards and some of those are pretty adaptable, pintails especially too. They're sampling this whole thing, which gets back to this question about distribution, the reason they are in certain places, the dogma that's out there, especially in the hunting community, like the old red-legged mallard thing and all that sort of stuff. All these things that the hunters like to talk about in the duck pond when they're staring at empty skies. But this technology and the methodology, Paul, is phenomenal. I mean, it's just amazing and will help dispel some myths and also give us some insights from a habitat perspective, from a harvest perspective, from a climate perspective. I think it's just wonderful.
And exactly right. When you talk about what are we going to use these data for example, I'm very excited about the blue-winged teal project because the timing of when teal come to Louisiana, how long they stay. We had a commissioner proposed to reduce the bag limit on blue-winged teal during the teal season under the guise that a smaller bag limit will reduce hunting pressure, it will keep more birds in the area, and thus we would have more hunting success over a 16-day hunting season. That's only applicable if it's the same birds that are in that area. And we suspect that's not true because we're killing adult males early in the teal season, and that transitions towards females and young of the year later in the year. So we know there's movement through, or at least we think there's movement through, but we have no idea how long does a teal stay, a blue-wing stay when it's coming through Louisiana. We have some indication after hurricanes with, I got articles from 1956 after Hurricane Betsy. I may have the years wrong, but that blue-wings stayed in large number instead of moving through. We see that variation. And so by having this technology on these birds, it's going to give me some information that I can use in setting hunting seasons in Louisiana and thinking about what's meaningful and what's not. Maybe we're just like a mid-latitude state with blue-wings. They're coming through, we better pound them when they're here. Or maybe we should think more about how hunting pressure is applied to a group of birds that are coming into our state and setting up housekeeping. Again, I'm talking too much, but the excitement about the data that are being generated, sometimes, it's impossible to overstate the filling in of that gap that this technology provides. But it is good to take a step back to say sample sizes, expense, power of inferences.
With proper funding, do you feel it's logistically possible to up the sample size? Can we get it to where it can be recognizable?
Especially for blue wings, they're like taking candy from a baby. I ban 3,000 to 5,000 every spring and 4 weekends.
So, obviously we don't want to become, trying to get money out of the government. It's like getting blood out of the turnip.
Just add money, Dave. Just add money.
We keep using economic drivers. Money is a common denominator in a lot of this, and in your case, money could be a good thing.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of grad students that could grab onto this stuff, so,
Oh, yeah.
you know, if somebody's wanting to donate some money to the cause, I mean, this is some really state-of-the-art, cutting-edge technology that can provide some really valuable information. And a lot of your work already has been through private funding, is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, these projects, Larry and I don't need to get into how much of a fight it has been. You know, every one of these 3 projects, I mean, just literally knockdown drag-outs trying to get administrative buy-in to do them.
And you've actually, at your place in Arkansas, have actually raised some money to do some of this stuff.
We have. I'm glad all this has kind of come to light right now, because I think it's important to talk about this, the sample size, and you know, if we can increase this, you know certainly better than I do how much more information we can get from this. And I can speak to it a little bit from that private side. Met you through social media. We started talking about the large concentration of white fronts that we're seeing in October. We're getting these birds in early October. Sometimes we'll even see them in late September. We'll catch them as they're coming in teal season. And I posed a question to you, where are they going? Because we don't hold that number throughout the whole year. So it's kind of, we're going to expand that sample size. We're going to see what's going on from our side of the fence compared to your study down here. But the biggest hurdle that I found is trying to raise money for this. And people want to get involved, and it's not just biologists. And that's the message I think we really want to get out in regards to this. If you want to get involved, you want to help, donate your time, donate your money if you can. Help and time is a big aspect of it, but funding that is tough, and I've learned that firsthand this year.
It's amazing to me when I can go get permission to trap white fronts on a roost 10 days before goose season. And I walk up to that guy and I've seen he's probably spent $15,000 to prep that field, to put that flock of geese right there.
Yep.
And I explained to him the project, and he's like, hell yes, I'm in. Tell me when you're going to do it. I want to bring my friends. We want to help. This is going to be awesome. And, having done this now for 4 years, I mean, it's amazing the support that you get. The ground truth thing that we've done the last 3 winters, I mean, we've gotten 96% access, to go look at the fields that the birds have used. People are dying for this information.
The appetite is definitely there. I think from a hunter's standpoint, the more people find out that they can get involved and they can play a role, I think it's going to grow immensely.
The banding system, we knew where he was banded, we knew where he was killed.
Yeah.
End of story.
Yeah.
That's it. And now you know everything in between. Everything. And actually this year, you've got a bird up in Alaska that would have went offline, but they built a new cell phone tower in some town, and all of a sudden now you know what he's doing right now on the breeding grounds.
Yeah, I've got another bird from 2016 that's nesting just outside of Prudhoe Bay, Alaska, that's transmitting every day too. It's right in a highly, highly industrialized, nasty, nasty looking landscape, right next to a square wastewater pond.
And then you made mention, we were talking the other day, you've got some of the mallards that went back. You know where they're at in relation to the prairie, and you were saying that you saw some of these birds are starting to try to nest in an area that doesn't look very productive for having a successful brood out of this. Talk about that just briefly.
Well, water is obviously what birds are looking for when they're flying across the landscape, especially in the spring. If they're chasing the ice line, those agricultural wetlands, they're very important. Even though they're farmed through, that's the first thing to thaw out in the spring. It's often a bare dirt basin. It's the first thing to thaw out as a frost seal. It's the first thing to get bugs in it, that gets warm in the spring. And seeing the duty cycle on these new units and having birds, chasing the ice line north in the spring, you can see birds getting attracted to a really wet landscape. Some of these places, especially the Coteau in North Dakota, there's 100 basins per square mile, 100 individual wetlands. And you can see what that bird's doing. I mean, with the precision that these units have, she's walking around that wetland, she's walking down the fence line, she's walking around the rock pile, she's going into the abandoned farmyard and walking through the caragana bushes. I mean, it's amazing what these birds are doing. And I can physically relate because I've hunted a lot of these places. My dad has picked up 3 dead birds that have been predated up there. Places that I've regularly hunted. I know the landscape. I'm seeing what the pictures look like, where he's finding those carcasses after they get predated. I mean, it's amazing landscape. And you start to think about, I caught these birds in March, they just survived the gauntlet. They survived spring migration. They show up to the best breeding conditions, you know, the Eastern Dakotas have had in certainly 20 years, and they still don't make it. You know, there's all those pressures. The wetland conditions are great, but there's a lot more to it than just grass.
And we haven't even touched on predation. That's a whole other issue that we could talk a half a day on, but you've documented the loss of some of your birds to predation. I mean,
Yeah.
you can go back and pinpoint that device and pull it and almost have a cause of death even. And
Yeah.
that not that you needed to prove that predation exists, but you can document what happened. I'm sure hawks and that kind of stuff you've seen where the radios end up in the nest or something, you know, so it's really cool to see where the information derived.
So do you lay that over like satellite imagery, so how you lay your points in so you can see them, then you can see the brush pile they're walking around?
Yeah, I mean, you can get imagery, you know, as recently as a month old, and you can.
And one thing we haven't touched on that used to be a limitation and is less and less of a limitation is the impact of the radio on the bird. That's always been a question, is to how much, I mean, to the point where in the study that Mickey referred to with mallards, we actually created the mallard migration network, where there were a lot of people on the landscape evaluating the mallard migration to make sure that those mallards with radio transmitters were acting consistently with the overall mallard population. We've done radio telemetry studies. One that I remember about pintails on the East Coast, where the pintails didn't migrate in the spring. Put the radios on them in the winter, and by the time they had carried that radio along, they were physically incapable of returning. But with the work Paul's doing, and Paul has this tremendous amount of experience from the beginning, you know, using VHF radios here in Louisiana in the early 2000s. Now, the shape, the attachment methods, the size of these instruments is now removing a little bit of our fear about the radio effect.
Talked a lot about the 38 mallards. Well, there were actually 200 units put out, and we always glance over, you know, the 160 that we didn't talk about. You know, a lot of that stuff you can spend a lot more time on the front of a project. You know, I was putting dummy units and still have 6 captive mallards carrying dummy units in an aviary right now, and you know, had 6 months of observations with them, doing time activity budgets, making adjustments, you know, figuring out, you know, how it was going to make as least impactful on that bird as we could. And we're experimenting with different harness materials, and we experimented with the transcutaneous stainless toggle method where it was embedded under the skin. We're trying all kinds of different things to, you know, we're never going to eliminate transmitter effects and capture and handling effects, but there's a lot we can do to minimize them.
Well, we want to certainly thank you for your hard work. Anybody, and I know some of our guys here at Grosse Savanne, it's helped you. It's quite a task to keep up with the pace you set, and you work day and night and spend a lot of hours in the field. It's not an easy job, and I want to thank Larry also. You know, Larry's your boss for allowing you the time to get out in the field and do some of that stuff, and we're looking forward. I know Cason's excited. If, you know, any way we can raise money to expand any of this stuff, we're all in. So we're really excited to see where this technology goes. So
Glad to have you guys partner.
Are you seeing any trends?
Well, the ducks, I mean, we just started this spring, so we got a lot to learn there. The white fronts, you know, again, we could spend the rest of the day talking about what I learned from white fronts, and of course the additional questions, you know, that have come up. The transmitters are becoming more reliable. They're getting lighter and smaller. You know, I started this thing, you know, hoping that it wasn't going to be a 2-year project. You know, 2-year projects are great. You know, that's what brought me here. You know, I did my master's work on mallards right here. 2-year projects are great, but long-term monitoring, I mean, that's every time, you know, Nikki would flip through the slides at the last fly meeting, it was, why don't we have long-term monitoring? You know, and Doug and I have talked for years, you know, about how I'd prefer to have 200 transmitters out over a decade than 200 over 10 years, or 200 over 2 years, which is what a lot of people are inclined to do these days. And we've got this unique thing, you know, going here where we're able to get the work done, you know, privately, you know, build a monstrous data set and then mine it, down the road, and use it to really answer some of the bigger questions. More so, the habitat use stuff, we've got a great handle on that right now. It's going to be probably 6 to 9 months before we have some products out on that, but that's coming. But the bigger questions about the habitat selection and the availability of that, the modeling stuff that's going to come, that's going to be a much more time-consuming endeavor. And having a wide variety of winters, have the cold, wet winter, have the cold, dry winter, have the warm, dry winter, and a warm, wet winter, and having all those variables, having marked birds on those landscapes, making all those decisions through a long set of time is really critical to understanding those choices those birds are making on, do I stay or do I go?
So, when a hunter kills a band, it's kind of like a trophy for a duck hunter to have that band, put it on his lanyard, and typically those guys will call in and report to find out where it was banded at. If somebody was to shoot a telemetry bird, what's the process with that?
It's got a little ID pad or an ID code written on it with the serial number, my cell phone number, the band. The bird is also going to have a federal band on it. My cell phone number is the best way to reach me. I've had folks call me in the field, moments after they've killed the bird. I have replica units available that I'll swap out, obviously, if the unit is still functioning, if it doesn't take a...
That's a big deal. The band goes in your pocket, but due to the expense, these things are reusable. You can put it on another bird later on. So you want them back.
Yeah, and we'll gladly exchange a replica unit for the functioning unit and get it back out on the bird. Most of the guys that have harvested birds, I've put them maps together. I've got pictures of that individual bird, on the day of capture, prior to release. I've sent all that stuff to them. A lot of the guys a month later have sent me, a framed picture on the wall of all the maps and, the picture of me or the tech holding the bird at release. And then 3 months later, I get a picture of a, mounted specklebelly on the wall with that replica collar on it. And it's, it's the conversation piece for the lodge and a, harvest opportunity of a lifetime. And then, of course, we get to redeploy the collar and learn from another bird. Cool. So you're not in trouble.